Hi, today we're going to be going over 5 tips for designing your characters. Now, this is kind of a general how I do type of deal, but I've made a lot of characters this way, and it is a pretty good system for me because I ask a lot of questions, and when I come up to answers to them, that actually helps me develop the characters more as a whole. So, the thing I'm actually going to be working on during this video is going to be a character sheet for a character of mine called Cerberus. And yeah, so that'll just be there for us to look at, and I'll actually let you know a little bit more about the character as we go along. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the tips. Okay, so now we're starting with the first tip, and that is, what is this character's role in the story? This is the most important question that you should be starting with. You know, what is the point of this character? What do they need to do? What do they contribute to the story? Are they even necessary? If you know that it's a protagonist, that's pretty obvious what you have going for you. If you know it's an antagonist or a side character or a villain, or if it's a rival or a friendly rival, you know, if you know what the character's role is in the story, it'll actually make them a lot easier to write later on down the story, so they're not a character that's kind of aimless and flowing, you know, here, there, or everywhere. But I think it's really important to understand, and there's a lot more different roles than you would think about, because comic relief is definitely one of them. If they're a super overpowered character, if they're the teacher character, something like that. So as soon as you understand their role in the story, this is something that you can actually come up with before you even come up with the look for the character. So Cerberus's main role in the story is actually the rival that turns into friendly rival for Nine. So she's the guardian of the underworld and escapes. It is part of Nine's main mission to actually go and get her back. So, you know, somebody's like, hey, I need you to come back. And you're like, I don't want to go back. And, you know, at first they fight, but then they become friends. You're like, hey, all right. So I know that that's her role in this story, but she is actually also stronger than Nine. So it is going to be a character that can kind of teach Nine the ropes in regards to combat. So I already know her role, and because I know her role, that is something that's going to really make it clear. So, you know, what is the point of this character? Why are you making them? That's the first tip. Why is it necessary, man? So the next tip might be fairly obvious, but that is, what is their personality like? You know, if you actually know the character's personality, that could actually affect their design itself. If it's a super emo goth character, then you better believe they're going to be rocking black like it's no one's business. They're always ready for a funeral. If it's a super cutesy bubbly character, then of course you're going to pick pastel or bright colors. That's assuming, you know, you want to stick to the stereotypes. You can break them if you want, but for the most part, a personality will definitely influence what the character decides to wear, how they style their hair, and what they look like. In Cerberus's case, she actually has 3 different personalities, so I try to keep kind of the same physical design for all of them, but they all change their hair, and they all have different markings on their face to let you know kind of which one is out at the moment. And that's kind of just a small differentiation for me to tell which one is which, and you better believe in the story that she does take advantage of it. She actually psychs people out by wearing the wrong hairstyle, but I want it to come through which personality is actually present, just based on how they're actually acting. Now, it is fun with this part of the character designing because you can pretty much create a person out of this character. You know, you can invent goals for them. What do they want to achieve? You can create influences and fears. I think side goals are also something that's really important and often gets overlooked. You know, if your main goal is to be the Hokage, you know, that won't happen for a very long time. But if you have more short-term goals for the character, that might be something that enriches them a lot. So in Cerberus's case, she is somebody who's very combat savvy and really likes to fight, but because of that, she actually likes fighting video games. So if I told you that this character is mad obsessed with Mortal Kombat and always goes to the same arcade to try to beat that one high score that's there, but is ironically really bad with technology, doesn't that just kind of give you a sense of the character being like, okay, yeah, no, she's really great at fighting, but it kind of adds a more grounded sense of the characters to, you can imagine her just, you know, at an arcade, playing a video game, getting frustrated, and then throwing it out the window, and then demanding that they order another one because this one is clearly broken. You know, if you have a small goal like that, that's kind of things that will add a lot of personality to your character. Or in another instance from a different story that I've worked on before, there's a character called Mark. He's pretty much a detective that's trying to find out a murder mystery type of deal, but he also has an obsession with trying to find the perfect coffee blend. So, you know, if you actually have smaller, more manageable goals for your characters, it just helps make them feel more human, more grounded, and it's something that can actually help you a lot. So what are their goals, what are their fears, and what are their side goals? All right, for the next tip is, what is this character's relationship to other characters? You know, when you're designing one character, you don't want them to stand out. They will work best if they're surrounded by other interesting characters. You don't want to make your main character the most interesting character and then everyone else kind of falls flat. The way I kind of look at it is kind of like if it's a character in on a chessboard. If you design just a king and that's the only piece on the board, it's pretty boring. But if you come up with other interesting pieces, you know, that can be your queen, that can be the rook, pawn, whatever. And if you have other interesting characters around them, it is interesting to see how they interact. So, you know, who do these people get along with? Who do they not get along with? Who do they support? Who would they violently fight against? You know, whose best friend is this character going to be? Pretty much if you try to coordinate with how the characters are going to interact, I find that the more unexpected it is, the better. A good example that comes to mind is actually Zuko and Iroh from Avatar. So if you think about it, this isn't a very likely combination, but that's what makes it interesting. You have the wisdom of an older character, and then you also have the foolishness and arrogance of a younger character. So when you pit them together, you know, their weaknesses are helped by the other person's strengths and, you know, the other way around. So if you actually pair your characters together in a way that you can find interesting, then that'll make your story flow a lot better, because it's pretty hard to, and it's pretty challenging, and it's pretty boring to write just internal monologues for characters all the time. But if you actually had them interacting with another character in a more interesting way, then wouldn't that make it a little bit more fun? Back to the example of Cerberus being addicted to the Mortal Kombat games. If she has to go to that store owner again and they're like, getting real bummed out with you breaking my games, dude. Now, Cerberus is pretty much like a guardian of hell. This is a character that could easily kill this man, but the fact that this is the person that gives her her Mortal Kombat game creates an interesting dynamic. She's a character that could absolutely decimate this person, but still respects him. Now, isn't that kind of an interesting dynamic? So plan your characters around their relationship to other characters as well. The interactions that you come up with are going to be what gives your story life. That is going to be what makes it interesting. All right, the next tip is about life experience and not being a self-insert. So, you know, there is a difference. You can use your life experience and not make a character just a one-to-one copy of you, just because self-inserts are actually kind of cringe. So don't do that. But you can take some aspects of your life and actually incorporate them into your characters. So, you know, depending where you're from, what you do for a living, what you do for work, where you went to school, who you hang out with, what languages you speak, even experiences that you've had as a person. If you've overcome something very difficult, you could probably write that very well. In my example, I've actually completely destroyed my knee before, and I needed to have knee reconstruction surgery, which was fun. I can actually put that towards my characters, you know? Maybe not that they need to have a one-for-one knee surgery experience like mine, but it's like, no, I could probably write physical trauma and their response to it really well. And I also speak Spanish, so I can actually incorporate some of that stuff into my characters as well. So, for example, Cenisa is another one of the characters from this story. Her name actually means ashes, and that's actually foreshadowing to her life experience itself. So she has the ability to manipulate fire, and she got burned so many times learning how to use it that she actually eventually became fireproof, and yeah, feels no pain. So you know, those are just two small instances of, oh, those are my life experiences that I can add to these characters to make them interesting. And you are always going to be able to write what you know better than what you don't know. You can research and study it to an extent, you know, so you don't actually need to be a wizard to write Harry Potter, but you can add your life experiences into those things. And with that being said, don't be afraid to give your characters flaws. Don't write a Mary Sue character unless the point is that they're a Mary Sue. It's best to give your characters personalities and weaknesses, so that way you actually have something to give them to improve. You know, if they start at 100%, where do you go from there? Unless you make them crash and burn back to 0%, and then they, you know, get back up to perfection. But that would be the exception, not the norm. So your life experience, use it. Just don't make it a self-insert, because that's cringe. All right, and the last tip is one that's more vague than anything else, but it's symbolism. Now, symbolism can be a lot of things. You know, when you see this logo, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Or if you see this or this, clearly a subject comes to mind, and the reason for that is just because of a symbol. Now, a symbol can be a lot of things for your characters. It can be a name. For example, I mentioned Senisa. It can be their color palette, the way they look. If you have a character that's a dark hooded, cloaky figure, might give you a sense of murder, So pretty much with symbolism, what you can do for your characters, if you understand them and you understand the tone of where they're coming from, then you can actually build the design based off of that. Even Cerberus themselves has a sense of symbolism, just according to Google, Cerberus in Greek mythology is just the Hound of Hades. It's a multiple-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld to prevent the dead from leaving. That's kind of the basis of what I'm working with. And then, trust me, I'm not the first person to use Greek mythology ever. Just take 2-second look at with a webtoon front page. You'll see it everywhere. So instead of a 3-headed dog, there is one body that inhabits 3 different souls. So each head is a different personality, and they all have different life experiences. They all have different fighting styles and stuff like that. So in Cerberus's case, this is actually relevant to her story just because she is actually a god character and pretty much gets thrown. It's like, the best way to describe it is like a reverse isekai. So instead of a character dying and going to a different world, you're already from the different world, and then you undie and go back to the normal world. So she's out of her element. 9 also gets reverse isekai, so they both get thrown into, just the normal living world. So, you can do a lot with symbolism, and you can actually invent something very iconic for your characters, whether it's their color palette or their look itself or just a prop or a weapon that they have. You can create something memorable for your characters, and I think that that's something really interesting. So, they're pretty much symbolism. The best way to think of it is a logo. If you have a logo of any different kind, that's usually pretty good symbolism. All right, so those are my 5 tips for designing characters. I hope that you guys found them helpful. Pretty much it was a lot of questions for you guys to answer, but if it helps you answer some of the questions about your characters and you learned a little bit more about them, then I'd call that a win. But, if you found that helpful, then please let me know. And I'd also love to hear about your characters if you're actually working on any. And what do you think of Cerberus's design? It's not a giant 3-headed dog, but what'd you think? You should let me know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you later. Bye!